Hi and welcome. I'm Andi Mioč and you're watching Headlines. As the war in Ukraine nears the end of its third year, Western sanctions imposed on Russia after the full-scale invasion began do not seem to have slowed its military efforts to the expected degree. The unprecedented scale of sanctions on its energy sector, banking, and most of its trade have left Moscow finding ways to circumvent the measures, as Ukrainian allies say, using complex supply chains and alternative supply routes. On the efficiency of sanctions and not only its economic impact, we're talking to political analysts Dimash Alzhanov joining us from Almaty and Shmagi Smkharadze coming to us live from Tbilisi. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Let's start with the basics. Dimash, for someone not in the know, what do sanctions imposed on a country mean, be it by the US or the European Union or a third actor? What are the goals of such an instrument and how efficient could they prove to be?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here. So the main idea is to increase the cost of the war for Russia by imposing the sanction for the different sectors of Russian economy. So you're reducing the Russians' revenue, the government's revenue, to produce weapons and to fund the war in Ukraine. The idea was good at the beginning, and of course, implementation is quite difficult. So it's unprecedented, and there is no quite clear mechanism how you can ensure the efficiency of the sanctions. So today it is very complex, and the economies of different countries interconnected, especially if you consider Central Asia. And not all the countries will need to cut the ties with Russia and follow the sanctions.
Shmagi, how much of an impact would you say that the sanctions by the Americans, the EU, UK and their allies on Moscow had an impact?
Thanks. Hello, thanks for having me. I think it has an impact, of course. I think it had more impact in the long term economic development and technological development, but in the short term, we also see that Russia is losing large markets, right? European Union, it's at 30% of world economy. So we see that even this year, the gas, which is like the pipeline, right? It's closed. It was going to to Slovakia and Hungary in Ukraine. But in the end, imagine how much Germany and Europe we are paying for oil and gas to Russia. And when Russia tries to sell it out by using the different tools, first of all, they are selling it very cheap, and second, and there is another thing that they need to spend much more money to find alternative markets, right, under sanction. So I think we see the countries like Russia, they should develop not like developed countries, right? For example, if you see that US or Germany or France, they are like okay with 0% or 1 or 2% development, Russia should develop at least like 8% or 10%, because we know that how it did China or India when they were trying to get closer to developed countries. So when somebody says that Russia is having like plus 1 or 2%, it's not a development. They should develop much more in order to stop the inflation, to enrich the market and so on. So it, of course, it has a huge impact on Russian economy.
Dimash, would you say that the sanctions imposed on Russia have affected the Central Asia and South Caucasus regions, not only economically but politically as well?
Yes, unfortunately, we can see that despite all the limitation and obstacles to directly deal with Russia and Russian companies, or the Russian individuals, after the sanctions, the Russian government now is trying to use special members of the Eurasian Economic Union, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Belarus, and others, just to use their jurisdiction banking system to circumvent the sanctions. So I think that's the result of the sanction policy, that the countries like Kazakhstan is getting much closer to Russia. So Russia is more politically and economically present in Kazakhstan. So it's obvious, as we can see it in the past 2 years. You also can see that Georgia is still under the Russian influence. So, and despite all the latest political developments, the pro-Russian government seems like capable of retaining the power and keeping the Georgia closer. So, at the same time, you see that Armenia have a different foreign political vector, but using the Russian market because it's important for the small countries around Russia to exploit the Russian 140 million market.
Shmagi, as Dimash rightly mentioned, there are reports coming in that Russia exports gold and diamonds to Armenia to then be re-exported to the United Arab Emirates and put on the global market. These claims are backed by the figures of trade that skyrocketed in the last year. What do you make of that specific way of circumvention?
Yes, we know that it's happening not only in Armenia but also in Georgia. Russia is trying to search different ways for selling their goods in the world, but in the end, of course, small countries like Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, South Caucasus, they can have some benefits, like short-term benefits for Russia in this situation with the trading and the re-exporting, but it's not it's not developing the real sector of economics, right? So in Georgia, even they had a law of is it correct in English, like offshore law. So it's somehow they are trying to take all the billionaires or I don't know Russian billionaires and so on in big large companies to give them special good situation in Georgia. And it makes a lot of questions because we know that it can somehow it distance us with our allies, right, Western allies, and it's not developing the real economy. So people are questioning these issues. Of course, you can make some money with using that Russia is under sanction, but it's not a long-term wise to do it wise. It's not a wise to do it in the long-term development. So we see that we are losing the Western allies and technological development because they are also giving the sanctions to our so-called government. So we already see how it can end up.
Dimash, let me get your take on this about third countries aiding Russia to circumvent the sanctions. For example, with Armenia, the society there is even gearing up for a EU accession referendum. What could this aid to Russia to circumvent Western sanctions mean for possible rapprochement of Brussels and Yerevan?
Well, unfortunately, we can see that there is no common policy from the Western countries when it comes to the sanctions circumvention. So it's in the case of Kazakhstan, it's the case of United Arab Emirates, Armenia, and other countries. So I think that's having all these economic dependencies around Russia. So the Armenia, one of these countries. So I think that for them right now, it's important to keep these economic relations, to keep the influence of Russian money and citizens, the companies that coming into the Yerevan and Armenia. So this small country, it's important for them to keep the connections with Russia. The same with Kazakhstan. It's not only just the sanctions; it's also opportunities. You have to see this process as for this autocratic countries of Central Asia as a good opportunities because they can re-export the electronics, they can re-export the many other goods under the sanctions, and increase their leverage connections with Russia because Russia is important security guarantor as well. So these relations are complex, and each country has a different reasons to keep these relations with Russia. As I mentioned, Kazakhstan incompatible, for example, with Georgia and with the United Arab Emirates, and even Turkey exploiting the weaknesses of Russia and trying to be the main hub for the Russian gas for East Europe.
This unity in the European Union is also an issue. Here, the European Commission is adamant on stopping Russian oil imports, but there are outliers in the bloc, such as Hungary and Slovakia, who rely on Russian gas, and they are now willing to impose sanctions on Russia, and they oppose the military aid to Ukraine. Shmagi, what could such voices in the bloc mean for unity in Brussels when it comes to dealing with Russia politically?
Yes, it's a good question. In European Union, they are always, last time especially, they are having problems with Slovakia and Hungary as a type of rule, right? They are talking about Russian influence, and because they are not joining the sanctions, and they are trying to somehow their position about Ukraine is not closer to other European Union countries, right, members. But in the end, we see that Romania and Bulgaria joined the Schengen area. We see the development in Serbia, so like hundreds of thousands people are protesting, and we see that in Slovakia also there are some kind of protests. So I mean, somehow it looks like that if they are not taking any benefits from pipeline through Ukraine, and also the European Union first time said no to 1 billion grant to Hungary. So if they are not taking so much money from West, the regime, and not benefit from the East, I think that it can somehow change the political situation inside. So we never know. Like, I think the main idea of European Union is somehow to force Slovakia and Hungary to join the common position, or maybe hope that the government will change and it will be more, not less Eurosceptic and more pro-European. So we'll see.
We spoke on Russia using third countries to circumvent the sanctions, but there's also the concept the Western states are warning and acting on the so-called shadow fleet, the cargo ships employing a range of tactics to conceal the fact they're carrying Russian cargo. Dimash, how viable are all these circumventions that Russia is using currently, and can they realistically be stopped?
Well, I hope so. That recently the United Kingdom and a number of other European countries, they agreed to have some common policy regarding sanctioning this shadow fleet. So ongoing Joe Biden administration is also considering the sanction against the shadow fleet and put more pressure on the third countries like Greece and others who is helping Russia basically to manage this 200 or so 300 tankers shadow fleet. So we will see how these sanctions will be effective. We see that now some serious actions are taken by the European countries. So there is a political will and there is understanding how they should push on this matter. So hopefully next year we will see the more effective pressure on shadow fleet.
The next year is full of surprises. We have Donald Trump coming back to the White House in less than 20 days. Shmagi, what do you expect of Trump when it comes to sanctions levied on Moscow, when we know his harsh stances on economic measures, when he said he will impose blanket tariffs on Mexico, Canada, China? Do you expect Trump to tighten sanctions on Russia?
Yes, as we know from the first term, his presidency, he's more, he's more protectionist, right? And he tries to put the economic interest of United States first, and somehow he likes these trade wars. But last time also we see some kind of changes. I don't know what we hear. We don't know how it can go, but we see that somehow he's like more. One thing is what he says, and another thing is what he's doing in the end. But yesterday we saw the interview of Zelensky. He said that he's waiting for Trump to come to Ukraine and also he's ready to Putin after he talks first with Trump. So somehow I think everyone is waiting for his presidency, and I don't know, we'll see. But as we know, like in the West, last period, especially like last 3 or 4 months, we see that so-called pro-Russian ultra right wings, they are distancing from Moscow. For example, there was a article in Le Monde that even Marine Le Pen party, the leader, the young leader, Bardella, is changing his position about Ukraine. So something is changing in Europe. Trump is coming, and we will see how it will go.
Dimash, would you say that Trump's new old term would bring a wind of fresh air, so to say? What do you expect from Trump once he takes office? He said on numerous occasions that he will end this war quickly.
Well, I think that we have to divide the political statements made during the campaign and the real situation in Ukraine. I think there will not be easy solutions for both sides, and especially if the United States is aiming to put the two sides under the table for the peace talks. I think they should consider that Russia is not aiming to stop this war. So it will be quite difficult to convince and to make sure that, or either to put the pressure on Russia and to make sure that they will accept certain certain agreement, and we will negotiate with Ukrainian side and to make sure that we will not stop or not start the war again, because political statement and reality on the ground is quite different. And despite being president of United States, you can't do much on that.
Let me ask you, gentlemen, this. Shmagi, first of all, do you expect any consequences on third countries that allow themselves to be the hub for Russia's circumvention of sanctions?
Yes, that's a good question. I think they had a great period of first 2 years in Ukraine, but this year is something changing, and I think that next year it will be more clear. I think the politicians in the West, they are trying to understand how it happens. First, it takes time, but in the end, of course, they are having the consequences. In terms of Georgia, for example, we see that they are not giving clear legitimacy for so-called ruling party, right? Georgian Dream, and we see that they are already imposing sanctions for so-called government and officials and oligarch Bidzina Ivanishvili. So I think in case of Georgia, it's clear that they are giving much more attention about how it's happening, the scheme, how it works. But I think it happens in another country. I can't say for sure how it goes in another country, but we see that in the West they are arising their interest, and they are trying to understand how the scheme works and to stop it somehow. And they are always giving a new sanctions for not only for Russia but all those countries and officials as well.
Dimash, what would you say on the impacts and consequences for the third parties helping Russia circumvent sanctions?
Well, I think there's again you have to take every case individually. You have the Armenia, you have Kazakhstan. The Kazakhstan, been negotiating with the U.S. government. There's a certain list of goods and the dual-use goods that shouldn't be re-exported to the Russian Federation. They come to the agreement, but at the same time, Kazakhstan is keeping their borders open. So whatever goods goes into the Kazakhstan, electronics or the chemicals or other sanctions goods, they can easily cross the border and will be re-exported into the Russia. And even the United States cannot do much with this. So I think that every country is exploiting the situation. My colleague mentioned the India that's interested in buying the oil from Russia with a discount. And you also have the China, who is politically and economically motivated to assist Russia and put the more burden on the Western countries. So we see that there is a lack of serious political will of outgoing U.S. administration to ensure that the sanctions in some cases could be more effective. And Biden administration put enough pressure to the third countries. So as long as there is no serious pressure in the political or economic or sanctioning consequences, the government of these countries are exploiting all the possibilities that they have.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us, sharing your insights and opinions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all in this edition of Headlines. Thank you for tuning in and keep watching AnewZ.